What are you thinking?
What are you thinking about?
The Twins, of course.
It's 5 Twins Thoughts
5
with Derek Wetmore.
That's right. It is 5 Thoughts. This is the SKOR North First Place Twin Show. I'm Derek Wetmore. Judd, Zulgad, and Danny Cunningham and Manny Hill are hanging out with me today. We're going to play 5 Thoughts in just a second. The 5 AL contenders that made moves at the deadline the Twins should be paying attention to. But I wanted to first tell you guys about the Glen Perkins on Baseball live event that's coming up next week. It's 4 days away already. Tuesday, August 6th at Modest Brewing Company in Minneapolis, just before a Twins game, right by Target Field. We're going to be hanging out downtown, maybe having a beer and talking about the Twins. If you want to come hang out with us, you can. It's easy to register. It's free to go, but you do need to be registered to attend that taping. Go to scorenorth.com/Glen for more details. scorenorth.com/Glen.
What day again?
That is Tuesday, August 6th. It's before a Twins game.
Twins Braves.
If you're going down there for the Braves game anyways, just come a little bit early. Come hang out at Modest with us. But don't forget to register. scorenorth.com/Glen. Guys, I've got 5 thoughts for you. Since Rami's not here, we don't have to do the whole intro, but he always says it's the column that was so good it couldn't be contained to the written word. And I disagree with him, but it's a fun segment, so we're going to do it. The 5 contenders in the American League, and you tell me where you want to stop. We can talk about any or all of them that made moves the Twins should be paying attention to. I think we have to start with the Cleveland Indians. Number 1, the Cleveland Indians traded Trevor Bauer for, this was a messy trade, and Danny, I heard you guys talking about it on Clusterphone the other day. But basically, what the Indians gave up was Trevor Bauer. Mm-hmm. What they get back was Franmil Reyes, the powerful outfielder from the Padres. They get back Yasiel Puig, who's I think he's a rental. I think he's a free agent.
Correct. Yeah, he'll be a free agent at the end of the year. They got him for 2 months.
And then they got a top 100 pitching prospect, Logan Allen, to add back into their system for depth. I think getting that for 1 year and 2 months of Trevor Bauer makes this team really interesting, because some people would argue they're worse with the pitching depth. Others would argue they're better because now they have a lineup.
Well, and they also got in 2 mid-level prospects too. They ended up with 5 guys back for Trevor Bauer for a year and a half of Trevor Bauer. I don't understand what Cincinnati is doing in this deal.
It was kind of strange.
I really don't. I understand what San Diego did, because Franmil Reyes was kind of a guy without a position there. He can really hit. He's not a good defender. He's going to DH in Cleveland. He's an American League player. And
a lot of pop, though.
And they get a top 30 prospect from Cincinnati in exchange for sending those guys to Cleveland. I don't understand what the Reds were doing there, because I don't see them as necessarily being very competitive. Yeah, next year they can have a really good rotation built around Trevor Bauer and a couple of the other really nice pieces they have there. But I don't get that trade from their perspective at all.
I honestly think all it is trying to capitalize on Joey Votto.
Maybe,
and saying, hey, we got to load up on 2020. Trevor Bauer at the top of that rotation looks pretty nice.
Yeah, I don't get that trade for the Reds.
This is, and the Mets are more dysfunctional, but this is the same thing of trying to think that you can win now and you probably can't in 2020. And so you're happy with you get a big name back. But I mean, let's be, frank about this. The Mets and the Reds screwed up this market too.
Yeah.
As a whole, they had no business getting involved, and they did. Cunningham, my question for you is this, off of Derek's point. When is Kluber going to be back? And Salazar had a rough start last night, but it was his first start since September of 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So what's the fate there? Because if Cleveland can get something from one or both of those guys for the remainder of this year, I think it changes the dynamic completely of this discussion.
I believe the expectations for Corey Kluber to start a rehab assignment within the next week or so, and then it's going to be touch and go from there, but they expect him back in the big league rotation before the end of the month. Danny Salazar pitched last night. He was on a pretty strict pitch count. And
rough start for sure.
It was a rough start, but it's his first major league start in 22
you.
months, and he's going up against the Houston Astros. There are easier ways to be kind of gently placed back into baseball than that. So I don't think it was great for him, but it wasn't terrible. They might get Carlos Carrasco back, who's battling leukemia at some point. I don't know if that's a wise idea for someone that's kind of fighting for their life to be back on the mound, but it's him and not me. They've got depth too, because they traded for Logan Allen, who's been in the big leagues with the Padres. I don't know if the Indians necessarily feel he's ready for this, but Zach Plesac's been really good as a part of the rotation. And Aaron Savale, who came up, he made a spot start earlier this season. That spot start was 7 shutout innings. Like, he's a guy that should be able to contribute to the big league rotation if needed the rest of the season, or at least until Corey Kluber gets back. So, yeah, they traded Trevor Bauer away. They got a haul for him. I think that they actually kind of screwed the Twins over with how much they got for Trevor Bauer, because it boosted up the asking price that everyone else had for all of the other starting pitchers.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
explain this to me then.
What's up?
Where was the happy medium between the Stroman trade and the Bauer trade?
There wasn't one.
Oh, I know.
Because you saw the Stroman trade on Sunday night, and you said to yourself, "Oh, wow, that's
the
not
price of poker.
that's not that bad."
Let's play.
No.
And then Danny,
Let's
you're right.
play.
You're right. Tuesday night, the Bauer trade goes down, and you're like, "Oh, hold on a second here. This is supposed to be somewhere in the middle."
Well, the Bauer trade was really interesting because the news came out like it kind of trickled out in terms of who was involved. The first report was from Jeff Passan
Yeah,
of
Puig
ESPN.
didn't get the message.
Yeah, we can touch on that plenty. So the first report from ESPN was that, Trevor Bauer is going to Cincinnati. And it didn't say anything about who was going back. And it also said that it was a 3-team deal. And then all of these guys are involved. And it was a 7-player trade, and 5 of them went to Cleveland. Like
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
just kept coming back. You go, that Scott Wood guy's involved. Oh, he's going to Cleveland too. He's not
Yes.
going to San Diego.
Right.
Oh, Victor Nova, the 19-year-old third baseman that the Indians also got, he's not going back to Cincinnati. He's going to Cleveland. Like they're getting
The
everyone.
Padres
other
got
than,
one guy back, right?
They got
Trammell.
he's a
The
top
outfielder.
30
Yeah, Trammell.
prospect.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean,
That's
he's
a big name, but still.
right. But he's the one guy that
He's the only
Padres
guy they got back.
Okay,
Yeah, the Indians got everyone in this trade other than Bauer and Trammell.
So it shows you how valuable they think Trevor Bauer is. And I think that's kind of the price of elite starting pitching. I know Trevor Bauer hadn't been as good this year as he was a year ago, but I think that baseball clubs look around and say, okay, who are the 25 guys that just shine, that rise above everybody else that you'd want in game one? 25, maybe that's a high number, but there is a finite number of elite starting pitching who can get that job done. I think Trevor Bauer is one of them. So for a year and 2 months, I mean,
as long as he
I think
stays away from
Cleveland-
the drone.
yeah,
Sure.
that's okay. Fair
If
point.
he's bleeding profusely from his finger, it's a bad idea.
If he has all 10 digits and
Yeah.
he's okay to stay in the game, you trust Trevor Bauer just as much as almost as much as anybody, which is a big statement, but I think it's true. I think Trevor Bauer legitimately has some of the best arm talent in baseball, to use a football term, with training camp here in the Hall of Fame game now. Football season's officially started. We can say arm talent.
There's no question he has the stuff to be a Hall of Fame pitcher. Like I don't know if his mental makeup is strong enough for that, but he certainly has the stuff, has the arm talent, has everything physically. He's just been gifted to where he could be one of the 20 to 25 best pitchers in the history of baseball with what he just naturally has. That's
So-
never been the question with him.
To me, I guess at first I thought that the Indians got better this year and in the future. And I talked with a couple of people in multiple different front offices who are now, it's like I've lessened my strong stance on that. Now, some people say, like, if at best it's like a sidestep this year, and that's really dependent on those other guys that Danny mentioned stepping up, the police acts of the world. If they step up and this pitching staff's great and Kluber's back soon, yeah, you're not going to notice the drop off of a Trevor Bauer that much, and it's a step forward. If that stuff doesn't happen and you don't continue to get, dominant stuff from guys who, let's face it, talented but unproven overall, then maybe this is a small, like a half step back in 2019 to take a full step forward in 2020 and beyond.
I love this trade. I think it showed real guts, and it took a guy.
There's chutzpah involved, no doubt.
And we all said, you're really going to trade Bauer? And we all thought, yeah, they are. But what are you really going to get? And the fact that you got a package that I believe does help you immediately. And Reyes can now DH for you. And look at Reyes statistically. I mean, yes, he can't play the field. I get that completely.
He doesn't need to there.
But but this is a guy who you can now insert in the lineup and say, go to it, and he's going to hit you home runs. Everything that we perceive to be wrong with the Cleveland lineup for the first, whatever it is, 3 months, 4 months, is now being rectified.
Mm-hmm.
And now Cleveland too, here's the thing. So Twins should be good in 2020, right? White Sox should be better for sure. Detroit and Kansas City won't be. But now I think there was a definite opinion that Cleveland was going to take a major step back here at some point in time. That step might not be as major as we thought, given what they did here.
And a lot of that's going to depend on how well these pitchers continue to develop. But the Indians have a track record that's really second to none in the way that they've identified pitchers and developed pitchers. Corey Kluber's now a 2-time Cy Young winner. He was just
That
a
was
middle.
Falvey's. That was Falvey's guy.
But still,
gone.
as the organization as a whole, he was no high prospect. He wasn't some top 30 prospect in baseball when they traded for him with San Diego. He was just another guy. And they've developed those guys, Zach Plesac and Shane Bieber and Aaron Savali. They were all drafted in 2016, and they're already contributing to the big league team. Like they have found a way to really do that. And you can't necessarily attribute those guys that have been really talented and have helped them out to Falvey because he hasn't really been around to see them blossom.
Sure. Yeah. I don't want to spend too much time on Cleveland because we're going to be watching them very closely the rest of the year here in Minnesota.
Next
and
weekend.
There's a nice little 4-gamer coming up at Target Field.
I can't wait.
Give us an opportunity to talk about the Indians, but we got to get to some other teams that made trades too. And I'd be remiss if I didn't go to Houston. Thought number 2, the Houston Astros got better. They went from potential World Series favorites in the American League to World Series favorites in the American League. They deal some top prospects for Zach Greinke, and don't sleep on the other move, sent 4th outfielder Derek Fisher, not that Derek Fisher, the other one, to Toronto for Aaron Sanchez, Cal Stevenson, and Joe Biagini. They basically addressed their bullpen with that move and are going to say, hey, you guys, come get into the Houston pipeline, and we'll teach you how to be lights-out relievers like Ryan Presley.
And we'll fix you, right?
They're trading.
Sanchez statistically had been awful.
That's right.
You always say to yourself, yeah, but what do the Astros
What do the Astros know?
And the Astros have done so where they, in my mind, separate themselves from a lot of franchises now is twofold. In Greinke, they take on salary. Now, they got some back from the Diamondbacks as well, but they took on salary. But they also showed the guts to make a trade that the majority of teams now in this league are running from. And you say to yourself, okay, does this teach a lesson to those other teams? The prospects are there not to trade all of them, but to move them.
You trade some of them.
Or I feel like there's this overwhelming majority of teams now that don't want to go to the baseball party and be asked about how could you give up the number 5 prospect? They're like, yeah, we didn't give him up. Ain't that great?
Know what it is?
And that's great, but you're not celebrating anything.
Job security. Do you know how much easier it is to go sell an owner, your boss, that, hey, we got a plan here. It's going to be a 6-year plan, but we've got a plan. Just look at what the Cubs did. Just look at what the Astros did. They were bad. Man, we've got to keep our prospects, and we've got to have everybody ready under team control to be a star.
But don't teams look at that?
It's more affordable, too.
If I own a team, well, that's true. But if I own a team right now and I look at what the Astros are doing or have done or what Theo did in Chicago, I see a guy that made trades that took a lot of guts. And I guess my question is, if the Twins didn't do it in 2019, when's that time? Like you don't have to be the most ardent baseball fan of all time to see the opportunity that presented itself, and the Astros are like, hell yeah, we're all in.
Let's go.
And everybody else is like, oh, we're all in. Can't do that.
If you don't take that swing, you can't really get blamed, or at least it's several years later. If none of the prospects pan out and you're bad at player development and you just never acquire the fringe of the roster in free agency and trades, you're going to get fired eventually as an executive. But if you take that swing trade and it's like what the Pirates gave up for Chris Archer.
Yep.
You'd imagine that the temperature on that seat rose a few degrees with a move like that.
But you know what? You can't sit around forever.
I know. I agree with you.
At some point, you've got to go all in. And I don't even know that I'd call this all in for the Astros because they're a team that I think, quite frankly, they're upset they didn't win the World Series last year. And that's why they made this move. They obviously won it in 2017, but they felt as if they were the best team in baseball last year and they didn't win the World Series. And they want to make a statement saying, this is ours.
I read a great note in Jeff Passan's column on ESPN.com yesterday. I guess I had either forgotten this or didn't know it or whatever, but did you know the Astros tried to trade for Bryce Harper last year?
Yeah.
At the deadline?
I remember that.
I completely spaced.
I think they came very close.
Yeah, the Astros and the Indians both tried to trade with Washington. I remember they wanted Shane Bieber from the Indians, and Cleveland wouldn't do it, and that looks like a really smart move now. I don't know what they wanted from Houston, but I know both of those American League division winners last year were on the phone with the Nationals about Bryce Harper.
Because the Astros have now acquired Justin Verlander via trade, and they extended him. Garrett Cole via trade. They're probably going to try to keep him, but he's a free agent this winter, so... By the way, Twins, keep your powder dry for that one.
I told Mackie this. I'll tell you this. Don't even start with that. The Twins will not be competitors for – the reason why the Twins needed to make a trade now is because I've accepted the fact, and you can criticize them or not, whatever, that they are not going to be a competitor for a guy like Garrett Cole, just like they weren't for Harper or Machado. The Twins need to, when they improve themselves, need to do it well, on Wednesday in this case,
Sure.
and they failed to. But the Garrett Cole thing,
4 years, $130 million. Who
it's a
says
great
no?
thought. It ain't happening in this town, boys. It's not happening.
They
It
traded-
should, but
they-
it's not
They
going
traded
to.
for JV, they traded for Cole, and now they've traded for
Yes.
Greinke without giving up who people widely regard their top 1 and 2 prospects. It's fascinating.
The Twins are an organization where, unlike the Astros and unlike some of these bigger market teams, you have to win these trades on the margin. You have to some of these smaller trades that aren't necessarily trading for Garrett Cole, trading for Justin Verlander, or a hypothetical trade for Bryce Harper. You have to win these minor trades. That's why your scouting department has to be so much better than everyone else. You have to be able to develop talent better than everyone else. That's how you build a successful team in a market quite like this.
I want to move on to the Oakland A's because that's a team that nobody ever talks about, and we can breeze past them if you want to, guys. But the A's did get better. They traded for lefty fireball reliever Jake Diekman. They traded for Homer Bailey. They traded for Tanner Rourke. And then I don't remember this trade, but Jameson Hanna also went Oakland's way just before the deadline. To me, I think there are 2 tiers of teams. Judd, tell me if you disagree with this. There are the American League teams who you're like, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see them in the World Series. And then there are the teams who are like, that's a really good team. I don't think they're going to the World Series. Oakland falls in that second category for me.
I agree completely. And they're a really nice team. I like them
We
a
saw
lot.
them here.
I like them a lot. But yeah, they are not a team that. But you know what they see to a certain degree that we've been talking about is they do see that the league is not that great. Now, Houston, I think, changed with the Greinke change. The dynamic feels very different now than it did on Wednesday at noon or so. So it's changed a bit. But I do think that Oakland looks at the American League with the right outlook, which is we can win playoff series here. It's not going to be impossible. There are some years where it feels impossible. I guess I'm going more towards Houston is now the clear-cut favorite without question, where on Tuesday I don't think that they were.
Do you agree with the tier? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Do I agree with the tier thing?
Yeah, just that there's
Yeah,
the teams
but
that
I'm
can
saying-
win the World Series and then those that are nice.
But I'm saying it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity at times to make the most of your situation, and I feel like Oakland is trying to do that.
Do you think there are 2 tiers, Danny?
I do, and I'm curious who else you have in that second tier, because I'm with you where I think Oakland's in that tier, but I really only have one other AL team in that tier, I think.
Well, it's a good point. Like Tampa Bay just never scares me.
Tampa Bay's in that tier for me too, but I think that New York, Boston, Cleveland, Minnesota, and Houston are all in that first tier where they could be in the World Series.
I agree with you.
I don't think I'm with you with Oakland and Tampa, where they're in that second tier for me. But that first tier, now the first tier is not everyone created equal, but they're all in it.
Right.
Those 5 teams could be in the World Series. If that's your 5 playoff teams, it's going to be a really fun October in the AL.
Where is Houston now? So if you tiered this off in the
1.
accurate, but 1, and then so tier 1 is Houston, and then the rest of the teams that you mentioned. But what's the ladder look like in your mind right now, Danny? Is Houston, and then where's the next team? Like the Yankees, if you want to pick that.
That's a really good question. I don't know that I have a good
Because
answer to.
to me, it's
I think
different today.
I think it's all it's really close. It's all jumbled up. It's Houston, and then there's a gap. They're in the same tier.
Yes.
And Houston still would have been number 1 for me on Monday prior to the trade deadline, prior to them trading for Zach Greinke. If you would have forced me to pick who I think was going to win the World Series, I would have told you at the start of this week the Houston Astros.
Okay.
And Zach Greinke reaffirms that for me, but it doesn't necessarily change a whole bunch in my mind. It widens that gap. It makes them more likely. It's still not like a solid thing. It's not, you can't write it in stone. If you go
Sports are weird.
If you go on FanGraphs today, the Houston Astros have a 26% to win the World Series.
Sure.
That means 3 out of 4 times they're not winning the World Series.
It's exactly how I think of it. I think Houston's first, and then the Yankees are probably next, and then throw in the other 3 teams as sort of that next tier. Any one of them wouldn't surprise. If the Twins go to the World Series, I can't tell you that I'll be shocked. I won't be shocked.
I wouldn't be
Same
stunned.
for Cleveland.
Yeah, I wouldn't be stunned either. Any of those 5 teams. Obviously Houston, New York, Boston, Cleveland, Minnesota. I would not be surprised if any of them are raising the AL pennant in October.
Thought number 4, we don't need to spend any time on them. The Yankees didn't do anything. They traded for Edwin Encarnacion. Was it 6 weeks ago or something now? But they didn't do anything at the deadline, and Brian Cashman got ripped for it. Thought number 5, the Tampa Bay Rays just made a series of interesting swaps. The big headliner that people are going to talk about is adding the right-handed bat Jesus Aguilar. Getting that guy from the Brewers now adds some of that pop that they've been looking for since the offseason. So, again, Not a team that scares me necessarily for the World Series,
Yeah,
but they just keep winning baseball games. I think at some point we do have to say that's a pretty good club down in Tampa St.
They're
Pete.
incredibly well run.
Yeah.
And how I don't know, why I don't know. You're playing in that just complete joke of a stadium and you got 12 fans going, but they have been blessed with people who are really good at taking that type of baseball team and maximizing everything from it.
They were the classic buyers and sellers.
Well, I
this year.
talked a little bit earlier ago about how the Twins have to win these trades on the margin. The Tampa Bay Rays have built a contender off doing strictly that.
Yes, that's right.
That's exactly
right.
how they've become and I don't buy them as a serious team that I think can win the World Series, but they're a team that could be a playoff team. And they've built
which is remarkable.
because
no revenue
because of how
whatsoever.
they've done it. They've built it by strictly winning on the margin
amazing.
time and time and time again. They win these small trades over and over and